July 25, 1944, 6:11 a.m. in Normandy, France. A German armored commander stepped out of what used to be his headquarters and understood, in a single horrifying glance, that the war he had trained for no longer existed. The earth looked burned, peeled open, and rearranged by something inhuman. Fields were gone, roads were gone, men were gone. Tanks lay scattered like broken bones, some flipped upside down, others buried so deep only their turrets remained visible. The air smelled of explosives, burning fuel, and something far worse. This was not a battlefield. It was a warning, and the message was simple. The Americans had arrived, and they were not fighting the same war anymore. By the summer of 1944, German commanders believed they understood the nature of modern war. They had spent years refining doctrine, studying maneuver, and perfecting armored operations. Their officers were trained to read battlefields the way a surgeon reads anatomy. Every enemy had habits, every army had limits. The British, in particular, were familiar. German officers had fought them across North Africa, through Italy, and now in France. The British Army was professional, disciplined, and cautious. They believed in preparation over improvisation. When they attacked, they did so with overwhelming firepower, careful planning, and strict coordination. A British offensive always announced itself well in advance. First came artillery, not wild, indiscriminate fire, but precise destruction. British gunners were methodical. Their barrages could last hours, sometimes days, grinding forward positions into dust. With almost clinical patience, veterans of the Eastern Front often remarked that Soviet artillery terrified the body, but British artillery exhausted the mind. Men cracked under it before seeing a single tank. Then came the armor. British tanks advanced in ordered formations, moving behind creeping barrages that swallowed everything in front of them. The battlefield moved forward in deliberate steps. Every phase had a purpose, every unit knew its role, and then, almost without fail, the advance slowed. British doctrine emphasized consolidation. After pushing several miles forward, sometimes 5, sometimes 10, British forces paused. They secured flanks, reorganized supply lines, reinforced positions, and prepared for the inevitable German response. German commanders noticed this pattern quickly. They noticed something else too. The pause was predictable. German armored doctrine relied on mobility, timing, and nerve. Commanders practiced what became known as elastic defense. The idea was simple but psychologically brutal. When the enemy attacked, do not immediately commit reserves. Allow the forward line to bend. Let the attackers spend momentum against prepared defenses. Then, when the enemy halted to reorganize, strike. This counterattack, often called the backhand blow, required discipline bordering on recklessness. Commanders had to resist the urge to intervene early. They had to watch ground be lost, knowing that patience would be rewarded. Against the British, it often was. Operation Goodwood in July 1944 reinforced the belief. The British launched their largest armored offensive of the Normandy campaign. More than 1,000 tanks surged forward under the cover of massive aerial bombardment. German frontline positions were obliterated. Entire defensive belts disappeared in minutes. For a brief moment, British commanders believed they had achieved the long-awaited breakthrough. Then the advance slowed. German anti-tank guns, positioned deeper than the bombing runs reached, opened fire. Camouflage positions revealed themselves at the perfect moment. Tanks burned in open fields. Crews bailed out into shellfire. German armored reserves counterattacked when the British halted to reorganize. Within days, hundreds of British tanks were destroyed. The front stabilized. The line barely moved. German officers drew a dangerous conclusion. They believed doctrine still ruled the battlefield. They believed patience could still defeat firepower. What they did not realize was that the war they understood was already over. July 25, 1944, morning. The sky over Normandy filled with aircraft in numbers German observers struggled to comprehend. American bombers arrived in waves so dense, They appeared to merge into a single moving mass. The sound alone felt unnatural, like the sky itself tearing open. Then the bombs fell. The bombardment that began Operation Cobra was unlike anything German units in the West had experienced. Explosions overlapped, merged, and reinforced one another. Shockwaves lifted tanks and slammed them back into the ground. Command posts collapsed. Trenches vanished. Men were buried without warning or escape. Survivors later described the terrain as unrecognizable, not damaged. Rewritten. When the bombing stopped, German commanders prepared for what they expected next. A pause. Reorganization. A moment to breathe before armor advanced cautiously through the rubble. That moment never came. American tanks surged forward immediately, not in neat formations, not behind creeping barrages. They advanced with urgency, momentum, and a willingness to accept chaos. When resistance appeared, American commanders bypassed it. Isolated German units were cut off, surrounded, and ignored. The focus was not on destroying every enemy position. It was on moving forward. Reports flooded German headquarters. American units were appearing miles beyond projected breakthrough lines. Maps became outdated faster than they could be updated. Orders arrived too late to matter. On August 1st, the situation worsened. George Patton's Third Army became operational, and with it came a tempo that shattered German command structures. Patton's orders were simple: keep moving, exploit success. Do not stop unless absolutely necessary. German doctrine assumed the enemy would pause to secure flanks. Patton explicitly rejected that idea. He instructed commanders to bypass resistance and leave cleanup to follow on forces. German officers prepared counterattacks that never materialized, because the Americans never presented a stable target. Above the battlefield, American air power ruled absolutely. Fighter bombers patrolled roads relentlessly. German soldiers called them Jabos, a name spoken with a mix of hatred and fear. Any movement in daylight attracted immediate attention. Dust clouds betrayed columns. Engines betrayed positions. The psychological toll was immense. Crews scanned the sky constantly. Men slept with one ear tuned for engines. Movement became terror. German doctrine required maneuver to counterattack. Maneuver meant exposure. Exposure meant death. Night offered brief reprieve. German units attempted to reposition under cover of darkness. By dawn, the Americans had already advanced beyond their reach. Time itself seemed to work for the enemy. What ultimately broke German resistance in Normandy was not American tanks, tactics, or even air power alone. It was replacement. German crews learned that destroying an American tank meant nothing. A Panther lost in combat was usually gone forever. Recovery vehicles were scarce. Spare parts were scarcer. A damaged tank left behind became scrap the moment the front moved. American tanks returned. Recovery crews operated under fire. Damaged Shermans were dragged from battlefields while fighting continued. Repair depots worked around the clock. Tanks knocked out one day reappeared days later. Crews that survived were reassigned new vehicles almost immediately. German soldiers described it as fighting a creature that regenerated faster than it could be wounded. This realization destroyed morale. Victory no longer mattered. Success no longer accumulated. Every gain dissolved overnight. By mid-August, the German position in Normandy collapsed. Allied forces encircled German armies near Falaise. Retreat routes clogged with vehicles and men. American aircraft attacked continuously. Artillery sealed escape corridors. The destruction was total. Tens of thousands were killed or captured. Equipment losses were catastrophic. Units that escaped did so as shattered remnants, no longer capable of organized resistance. After the war, German commanders reflected on what they had faced. They respected the British. They understood them. They could plan against them. The Americans were different, not because of superior tanks, not because of flawless tactics, but because American warfare removed the value of time. They advanced without hesitation, replaced losses without pause, accepted risk without fear. German doctrine depended on windows of opportunity. The Americans closed them all. By 1945, German commanders no longer hoped to defeat American forces. They hoped only to delay them. The methodical hammer could be survived. The American flood could only be endured.